sewing table, I'm going to do the hem here. The hem is the edge of the fabric, like on the bottom of shorts or a dress. We're going to measure 1.5 centimeters. So you can go from the end to 1.5. You can use a ruler if you prefer, however you'd like to measure 1.5 centimeters. Then we're going to fold over 0.5, and then we're going to fold over at that 1 centimeter, at that marker. This should be 1 centimeter, if I've done it correctly. Perfect, 1 centimeter. So we fold over 0.5 centimeter and then fold at that line. Once we've done this all the way along, depending on how you're pinning it or how you prefer, you're then going to stitch it as close as you can to that folded edge, this edge here. We are now stitching the line for the hem on our pocket. So we're going to put the presser foot edge to the edge of the material, and our needle position is in the middle. Hold the top thread tight, turn the handbell towards you till the needle goes down. 3 reverse stitches to start. And away you go. I am doing the needles, the pins in different ways. So you can see if I continued over that needle, it wouldn't matter, it would just flow over. We don't want that because it can damage your needle. But with this one, if I was to go over this pin, it would get caught in the stitching. So we need to remove them. And that's why I always say pin perpendicular to the line that you're sewing. Three reverse stitches to finish. Trim your edges nice and close, and you have a beautiful straight, hopefully, hem. Now you go to the iron and you iron this. We are going to place our pocket edge along our lining piece and lengthways. We're then going to place our pocket edge, our pocket, 1 centimeter from this edge, and we're going to pin that into place. I'm just going to remove the pins I placed under here. Then from here we're going to start sewing our pockets. I'm going to use this as my first line. So knowing that I am placing this brush in, I want to do a few fat ones, which will be about here. So I can measure those. So I'm going to do a few at 4, using either tailor's chalk or a fabric marker. And then the last one right on the pocket edge, because we are going to be stitching along here for our final edge. Then I'm going to be using some narrow ones for my more makeup brushes. And then hopefully my 4 will fit my lip gloss or fatter brushes. So I need about, if that's down there, about that much, which is about 2.5 centimeters, I think. So let's do 2.5 centimeters, nice and neat that way. I'm going to leave a large base at the end because we're going to have a 1.5 centimeter seam allowance, and then that will leave about 4 centimeters, yeah, 2.5 at the end. So let's head over to our machine and we're going to stitch these all the way down. I'm going to make it a little bit easier for myself. I'm going to use this as my guideline, make that nice and straight, and I'm actually going to draw on all of my lines to trace. You can use a set square, or I'm using French curve, but I've got the set square at the end. And then we want to use quite a tight stitch and make sure we reverse stitch as well. I'm going to start by basting along this edge and then down my pocket and then across at the bottom. And this will just hold it in place while I'm sewing. I'm going to put the press foot nice and close to the edge so that when we do eventually put this into a seam, you won't see this line of stitching on the shorter edges of the pocket. Now, as you can see, I'm about to go over that pin, so it doesn't really matter because I've pinned it the correct way. Just got a little bit of excess fabric, so I've lifted my press foot before I continue on, just to push it under the press foot, ready to go. That's exactly where I want to be. I want to be as close to the edge as possible. If you're unsure, you can use this little bit as a marker. Use your press foot as a marker for where to sew. I'm sewing as close as I can to that edge, all the way down. There's a little pucker, so lift my foot, place it down again. My pocket's in place. Now start with your middle stitch. I'm going to sew over that ugly seam that I've got as my first one. Make sure you do 3 reverse stitches to start. And 3 at the end. I'm going to neaten up all my threads at the end. Always start at the top of the pocket, because we want, if we're accidentally moving the fabric around, we want it to be all equal. Continue along. Okay, I've trimmed off all my threads, I've ironed it, and I've even tested the end use to make sure that it's at the right length. I've got 1.5 centimeters here, and I've still got 1.5 centimeters at the top, so my brushes will be a little bit long for this case, but I've readjusted all of the sizing for your measurements, so you'll have a little bit more room up here. Yours will be a bit longer and using a bigger zip. I'm happy with that, so I'm going to get my piece number 1. I'm going to make sure I'm placing it so it's a directional print, so I want the little these ones upwards. I'm going to place it on top and pin as much as you feel necessary. If you've got really movie fabric, then you pin about a hand width, no more than that, apart. I've got my pins under here that I'm just moving to the top. And then you're going to place your hat elastic. You can use a hair tie or anything like that, and we're going to place it inside this way and just poking out at the edge. this is what's going to hold our button in place. We want to make sure it's nice and in the middle, so I'm going to get my ruler. Mine is only 21 centimeters, yours should be 25. So the middle of 25 will be 12.5. Use the halfway point, we're going to pinch those nice and close. This is going to be really hard to pin, so I'm going to pin either side of this in place. If you use a hair tie, it's much easier because then it will be round at the top. This will hold it in place enough for me. We then need to leave a gap. The gap is going to be where we're going to top stitch later. I'm going to leave it on this side because then it will be hidden when it's actually rolled up and it will be more secure. So I'm going to leave a gap of about 4 centimeters or 4 fingers if you like. And that's going to be my gap. That's where I'm not going to sew. So I'm just going to put a little marker here to make sure that I remember that's where I'm starting and finishing. Let's head to the machine. Now I'm at my machine, I'm ready to sew around the outside. I've checked my machine settings. We've got straight stitch, 3.5, 0 stitch width, and we're going to use our second guideline, which is 1.5 centimeters from the edge. So we're sewing a 1.5 centimeter seam. Most of the commercial patterns use a 1.5 centimeter seam for a woven fabric, so that's why we're practicing that today. Press the foot down. We're going to put our needle down like we always start and 3 reverse stitches. We want to reverse stitch here because that's where we're going to turn inside out. Now for those that aren't very good at guessing where 1.5 centimeters is, you can always put a little marker here so that we know when we're sewing up when to turn our corner. So you hit your marker, which is here. Put your needle down and you turn your material. Remember our zip is here, so we want to make sure that we are very conscious not to sew over any metal if you've got a metal zip, or the teeth at the top. So I'll be sewing about there because that's the 1 centimeter, so about here, and I'm happy with that. I might find that I need to move this down, your zipper down, just so that your presser foot doesn't get caught. To go nice and slow over our zip. Still got my raw edge alongside my seam guide. Pull my material at the top and bottom to the get my 1.5 at the end. Put our needle down, turn it, make sure our raw edge is matching there. We're going to continue on. I'm going to go nice and slow over my elastic, make sure I'm really catching it in place. Now I'm just going to reverse stitch, make sure I really caught that elastic and it's nice and tight. And I should be able to test it by pulling that and I can't pull the loop inside. Needle down, turn it back around, you can see it just slightly off, so I'm going to correct myself. I'm going for 3 layers, our pocket and our line. I'm sewing over my pocket now, which is why I got a little bit thicker. Needle down, turn around. Get to the edge here. Oop. Now I'm going to make sure I do 3 reverse stitches. Pull it off and we're going to go turn it inside out. Before we turn this out, we need to clip the corners. So the reason why we clip the corners is to make sure that they are reducing bulk. So we want to cut basically along the diagonal here. The more we cut in here, the easier it is going to be to trim the corners out nice and neat. So I'm going to cut straight along, not cutting through our stitching. Then I'm going to get this little bit of bulk here, or the second seam, and just cut it at a different angle. Oh, that's my pocket there, so you can see how fat it is. Okay. Then I'm going to do all the corners on a nice diagonal. there, so that's going to be quite fat. I'm just going to trim that back as far as I can go. So I'm just cutting our pocket edge now. Not through our stitching, just our seam allowance. Get our other edges, these aren't nearly as bulky, so they're much easier to sew, or cut, sorry, on a diagonal. Nice and close, beautiful. We're going to turn it inside out. Slowly. Nice and slowly and carefully all the way out. Now I'm going to get my pointer here. It's just a piece of dowel, or you can use a pencil, the end of a pencil, and I'm going to turn out these ends as tight as I can. So pushing the dowel into the corner to get it nice and pointy. This is going to be a really thick part, so we want to make sure we can press it over as best as we can. That's my pocket edge. Down we go to the other side. Point it out. Nice and pointy. Beautiful. This is pretty much finished. The only thing we need to do is top stitch all the way around. We want to make sure we can enclose this edge. So we can see there that it needs to be pinned. I want to make sure that on my good side, my outside, I can't actually see much of the pocket. After doing this process, I'd highly recommend that you put your gap at the top here. So I'll write that in the instructions. Let's head to our machine. We've got 2 more steps, top stitching and then sewing on our button. If you're not that confident in top stitching, you can always have ironed it but first. It's just that my iron's not on at the moment. So ironing it will get that nice and neat so that on one side we can't see the outside and then on the inside we can't see the outside. Right? We're going to go straight over this to hold it nice and close in place. I'm going to start at a corner so it's not as obvious. I'm lining up the edge of my material with this part of the press foot. So nice and close. Needle down, 3 reverse stitches to start. And away you go. When we get to the edge, we're going to go needle down, press foot up, turn it around. Down we go. And as you can see, I'm just kind of rolling the fabric out, making sure I've got all of that out. As you can see, it kind of folds in, so I want to make sure between my fingers that I'm just kind of rolling out the material to make sure the seam is right on the edge of where we're sewing. As we get up to your pocket, I can't actually sew around my pocket because the metal is too close to the edge. I'm hoping that with the changes I've made that you won't have this problem. So I'm going to go up along this line and then continue on, and then we'll come back and sew this edge. So I'm just going to carefully negotiate this little section. I'm going to reverse stitch. I can't do the bottom, so I'm going to cut my threads here. You continue all the way along. I'm going to start here again. Press foot down, needle in, reverse stitches. I'm going to go as nice and close to the edge so I can close that gap. Continue and turn that corner. I'm going to start again from here. Just because of my metal zip. Some of you may experience the same thing. I'm just making sure I'm pulling that right out into the seam. If not, my material will be a different size. Let's trim off all of our threads and do our final step of button. So we've completed our top stitching. I've given it a nice iron as best as I can. Then I'm still finding little threads that I haven't trimmed off, so I want to make sure that I do all of those. This is what makes our product look like it has been sewn professionally. Making sure these finishing touches are really beautiful. We're going to roll it up a little bit looser because we're going to have things inside, and then fold it over. As you can see, it's quite loose. We're going to have makeup and other things inside, but this is where we're going to show and make sure I put our button. We don't want to pull the elastic too tight, so I'm just having it nice and loose, and this is where I'm going to place my button. I can't decide which one, but I'm going to go with this little nice metallic feature to match my zipper. It is a little bit bluer than I'd like, but I'm hoping that you don't notice or it matches. So I've chosen blue thread because I'm going to go through to the other side. We have a double needle thread, which means that we've got 2 threads sticking out. We're going to do 3 oversews on the spot for our button. 1, 2, 3. As you can see, I'm not going through to the back. It doesn't really matter because it will just be some nice neat threading. We've chosen buttons with shanks, which means that they are these little bits that stick out so the button doesn't lie flat. The reason why we've done this is so it has enough room for the elastic to go through. So we're going to go again through there and pull it nice and tight. Through the button, through the material. Through the button, through the material. one last one, and then I'm going to catch the material, as you can see there, and do 3 oversews again. 1, 2, 3. I'm going to trim off my threads nice and close. Laying it down. That's my button. Let's roll it up. Pack it full of my stuff. As I said, I've changed the measurements, so your makeup brushes or pens or hopefully things won't be sticking out the top. Rolling it up, and close with the button. Complete.